Disney absolutely ruined Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi. And that's a pretty old story for now, but I think it's still worth talking about considering that I'm still interested in it. I still got a request for it fairly recently, and it's still a hot topic even all these years later. But to really understand why Luke got so screwed over by Disney, we have to first consider what Luke Skywalker actually was, who his character was, and what he represented in the original trilogy. So let's take a look at who Luke Skywalker was in the original movies, how Disney messed him up for The Last Jedi, and also how they failed to recover him with The Mandalorian and The Rise of Skywalker. Luke Skywalker is first introduced in A New Hope as a young, naive, sort of ignorant farm boy who doesn't really know what's going on but just has some general dreams of escape and adventure. And this is really key to his character. Because one of the main purposes of Luke Skywalker, especially in A New Hope, was that he's basically an audience stand-in. He's the one that people relate with and they understand and they connect with when they're watching the movie. No one is really familiar with that galaxy far, far away, especially in the very first movie. So that's the whole purpose of Luke Skywalker, is so that people have a way to learn about things. Because of that, Luke of course has to start out not knowing things like the audience, otherwise there's no point in him being the audience stand-in character. But then it's through that we actually get to learn a lot more about the galaxy of Star Wars and the story overall. Us connecting with Luke in the early parts is also really important because it makes the story have way more impact. If it's just a story where you're watching characters who know what they're doing from the beginning, then it's just not as engaging. The Phantom Menace is actually a really good example of this. I still think it's a pretty good movie and has a lot of great qualities, but the audience connection to the characters is definitely one of its weaker points. It's a lot harder to connect with Qui-Gon or Obi-Wan, or even Jar Jar, who kind of know what's going on, rather than Luke, who's basically totally fresh as just a farm boy who doesn't know much at all. So when Luke learns about the Force, we learn about the Force. When Luke learns about lightsabers, we learn about lightsabers. And when Luke finally reaches his potential and he destroys the Death Star at the end of the first movie, we feel that too. And as the audience character, Luke really has a strong responsibility to carry much of the emotion of the story. And that's a super, super important role. As Luke has his ups and downs, he's the one who tells the audience how to feel, more than any other character. When Luke is feeling successful on Hoth, we feel his success with him. When he feels discouraged on Dagobah, we feel his discouragement with him. When he's feeling scared but brave fighting Vader, we feel that with him. And when he feels the shock of a revelation like Vader being his father, we feel that too, which is why that's such an iconic scene now. Luke is the emotional core of Star Wars in many important ways. He's one of George Lucas's main, most important characters for the story. And as that, he has to convey the feeling and the meaning and the themes of the story the strongest. George Lucas didn't want to write just a tragedy or a sad story or a political drama. His main goal was to write a story of magic and adventure and inspiration, particularly for young children. It's really a fairy tale story about Luke being a farm boy who grows up, learns some magic, goes on an epic adventure, saves the princess, and makes the galaxy a better place. It's supposed to inspire people, give people hope, show people that they can make it through anything no matter how hard it is. All they have to do is support their friends, do their best, learn from teachers, and strike out on their own. So with all of that, with Luke being the audience stand-in and the emotional core of the story, and with the emotional core being hope and inspiration based, that leaves us knowing that Luke is the inspirational, hopeful, emotional core of the Star Wars story. He's the one who saves his friends. He's the one who brings Anakin back. He's the one who helps defeat the Empire and the Emperor. He defeats the Sith, and he makes everything better. That's how Return of the Jedi ended, and that's why everyone loved that ending. People debate about the Ewoks and the end of the war, and how dark it was or not compared to Empire Strikes Back, but really it's about Luke and his hopefulness and his bravery saving the day in the end, and that's really not controversial. Everyone loves Luke Skywalker. Everyone loves Darth Vader and Anakin's story. Everyone loves how Luke saves him at the end, refuses to kill his own father, and inspires his own father to protect him. It's a really wholesome, perfect human story. And that's the purpose of Luke Skywalker. So how did Disney mess this up? In The Force Awakens, they barely used him at all. They basically just completely ignored him. And even Mark Hamill had better ideas than Disney.
So I have this long list, and I'll tell you where I thought I came in the forest, when the lightsaber goes like this and flies off. I said, oh, what a great entrance. Rey caught it? She hasn't even been to Dagobah for training.
Sure, maybe it was supposed to be a new story about new characters for a new generation, but you can't do that by just completely eliminating all the old characters from the story, and definitely not by primarily kicking out the core emotional character of the main story, the one who carries all the themes and the entire plot. The creators were worried that Luke would take over The Force Awakens and become the main character, which honestly he probably should have been from the beginning, and then pass the torch later. But instead, their solution was just to keep him out of the movie entirely and just push him back to the sequel. Which meant that people spent the entire Force Awakens movie just wondering, where is Luke? Where is the story? Where is our main character and our main emotional connection to this? And then when we finally do get to see him at the end, he doesn't do anything. There's nothing important. He's kind of there. He has some Jedi emotional flair to him as he turns around, I suppose. And that was kind of cool. It leaves a lot of open ends that could have been followed up on. And honestly, if The Force Awakens had ended like that and then been followed up by a great movie, I think it could have actually worked pretty well. I still think that Mark Hamill's idea of him rescuing Rey from Kylo Ren at the end would have been absolutely the perfect ending for The Force Awakens, given that the whole story was about finding Luke, and it would have also solved the problem of Rey being overpowered and defeating the villain on her own in the first movie, while also giving Luke and Kylo some connection and showing Luke for who he is early on. But anyway, even without that, it still could have worked. So The Force Awakens on its own, in many ways, was an okay movie. But then Disney just really went off the rails with The Last Jedi. I personally blame Rian Johnson just based on the interviews I've seen and how he's talked about the story. But obviously nothing like that can be confirmed, so go ahead and do your own research and come to your own conclusions. So for The Last Jedi, Disney had this director whose main focus is on deconstructing things, not necessarily replacing them, explaining them, analyzing them super deeply or any of that, mostly just deconstructing things. And he tried his best to deconstruct Luke, supposedly. Supposedly to subvert the audience expectations and create some extra drama. Honestly, this could probably work with many characters. If someone made a movie deconstructing Yoda, or deconstructing Mace Windu, or even deconstructing Anakin, Princess Leia, Han Solo, it could have been interesting. It could have been a great deep dive into their character, an interesting look at some of their conflicts and their struggles, what path they'll choose. It could work for so many Star Wars characters. There's a lot of gray in Star Wars. But it just really does not work for Luke. Because Luke isn't just a character. Luke is the emotional core of hope and inspiration. So when you try to deconstruct that, you're directly taking out the core of Star Wars and attempting to deconstruct it in front of a bunch of Star Wars fans. And if you don't deconstruct it properly, put it back together properly, and then return it to its original place, it's definitely not going to work. And honestly, I don't even think it's worth attempting because that's just such a risky thing to try. And in failing to do so, at least in my opinion, and I think the opinion of many other people, Disney and Rian Johnson and the creators of The Last Jedi really just took that core of Star Wars, pulled it out without really understanding it, deconstructed it for fun or because they were curious or they wanted to try something edgy, and then at the end of the movie you can see them trying to reconstruct it, trying to put it back in its place, but you know it's just not the same. It doesn't actually solve any of the problems that were created for no reason. So really what they did is they just took Luke Skywalker as a character, and then they just took him apart for basically no reason, with no plan of how to put him back together. And in doing that, they lost the core of Star Wars, and then they try to put it back as just this hollow shell, and it really, really doesn't work. There's no heart left to the story by that point. Nothing's going on. It's just Kylo being mean and mad for no reason. Snoke is gone. Rey is just a perfect good guy doing generic good guy things for no reason. And sure, Luke has a new Force power that's actually not that helpful. He doesn't use it that much, except in this one case where he could have just flown there anyway. And just like that, the core of Star Wars is gone. This Luke Skywalker, the one who ran away, hid while his friends died, didn't even try to save anyone, gave up on his nephew, attacked his nephew in his sleep, at least considered it strongly enough to be in the position of turning on the lightsaber to do it, and barely failed to just slightly save his friends by buying them a bit of time as they were losing at the end of the movie, is not the Luke Skywalker we knew. This is not Luke Skywalker. If you've seen Inside Out, I think the best way to think about this is having Luke as a core memory of happiness in Star Wars, and then you have maybe the sadness memory from Order 66, and all these different core memories of Star Wars that really make the entire story strong. With the most important core memory being that happy memory of Luke and the inspiration and hope that comes from that. By changing that memory to be confused or mixed with sadness or anger or disgust or any other feeling The Last Jedi added on to this character from his out-of-character actions or interesting odd choices that people disagree with, whether they fit the story or not, changing that core memory of Star Wars at its center from happiness and hope and inspiration to something else, whatever the reason and whatever that something else may be, it really, really messes up and changes the overall story of Star Wars. Because when you take away that happy ending, the entire story becomes a lot more tragic, a lot darker, a lot more nihilistic, a lot less hopeful, and it becomes less of an inspirational story and becomes more of a confused, depressing story with no real direction. Whatever the little boy with the broom at the end might try to show you. You can really see at the end they tried to put that hope back in with the little broom boy, but that boy force pulling a broom doesn't actually say that much, even as a metaphor. The First Order has destroyed the entire Resistance. Luke is dead from using the Force. Almost all the good guys are dead or on the run. The bad guys are taking over the galaxy, and even that kid who kind of has the Force, he's still a slave, and he was left there by Finn and Rose from the Resistance. The chance of anyone picking him up, training him to be a Jedi, and saving him are honestly pretty low. He didn't even show up in The Rise of Skywalker or anything. Honestly, at that point, it's more likely that he gets picked up by the First Order and becomes an apprentice of Kylo Ren or something. It's not exactly a motivational ending. Not to mention that giving this random kid the Force at the end of the movie as kind of a way to show that everyone has the Force and everyone can be a Jedi as long as they're inspired enough by the story of Luke, that actually really undermines Luke's story in my opinion. Because Luke's story is not everyone is great and special and perfect and they just have to be brave and work hard to become great and special and perfect even more. The story of Luke is more like, if you're born with certain gifts or certain responsibilities in a certain situation where you can help people, it's about being brave and being responsible to take up that challenge, to improve yourself so that you can help the people in the ways that you can. The interview where Daisy Ridley mentioned something about how from Disney she heard that everyone has the Force just really was not good for Star Wars.
Is General Hux Force sensitive?
This is what we were just talking about. I thought that no. I didn't think he was able to be, but if he can be...
Everyone has that ability. It's just some people are more in it than others, right?
Okay.
That mentality is not helpful for the story. Star Wars isn't about everyone has Force powers if they try hard enough and they're all brave and everyone can be Luke Skywalker. It's not about everyone being Luke Skywalker. It's not about Luke being so perfect and then, oh, we need to deconstruct him and show that he has flaws too and pull him back down to human level. That's not what it's about. It's about Han, Leia, Chewbacca, Luke, C-3PO, R2-D2, Ben Kenobi. Everyone has their own unique skills and they all use it together, especially on the Death Star in A New Hope, for example. Everyone has different skills, different goals, different responsibilities, different choices to make, and it's up to them to make sure that they're making good choices that help themselves, help the people around them, and make the world better. Some people are naturally better at some things than others, and no one has to be perfect at everything. No one ever thought Luke was perfect. He starts out in A New Hope as kind of a whiny, ignorant farm boy, and we love him for that. In the same way we love Anakin, even though he had the same problem, and Obi-Wan, even though he was also kind of pretentious in The Phantom Menace. Yoda makes a lot of mistakes. Obi-Wan makes a lot of mistakes. Anakin makes so many mistakes. All the characters in Star Wars are really flawed, including Luke. Luke's not perfect. He gets his hand chopped off, he falls off cliffs a few times, he struggles, and he almost turns to the dark side at the end. No one ever said Luke was perfect. There's no need to take him down from his pedestal, because he was never on one. Luke is really just showing how a normal person can take the gifts that they have, the chance that they have, the opportunities that they're given, even if it's small or simple, and just keep following those, and eventually you will do great things if you continue following every chance and opportunity you have. Luke is an example of how if you focus on taking care of yourself and taking care of others and trying to make the world a better place, then eventually you can do it, even if it's beyond your power. Luke doesn't storm the Emperor and attack him with lightsabers and blow him up like Rey does. Luke doesn't have the power to do that. Luke is a regular guy who just has such strong moral convictions that he's able to inspire the people around him to use their own gifts and powers to help him make the world a better place. Now, I know that Disney also tried to retcon this a lot with J.J. Abrams in The Rise of Skywalker after The Last Jedi got so much backlash. You have scenes like Rey throwing the lightsaber in the fire and Luke catching it and saying that she needs to respect the lightsaber more, and different scenes like that. And you get to see Luke smiling as a Force ghost, which is a nice touch since Mark Hamill cares so much about the character, and the main thing of the character is his positivity and his energy and hope. So it's really important to have that smiling moment of Luke, so I'm glad we got at least that. But unfortunately for me, those moments in The Rise of Skywalker really can't cancel out the damage that was done by Disney earlier. Because The Last Jedi, at least in Disney canon, it still happened, and its effects are still there. Sure, we have a deleted scene of Luke mourning Han's death, but it never officially made it into the movie. They didn't consider it important enough. And unfortunately, due to Carrie Fisher's passing, we'll never get the chance to have all three heroes together on screen again. Not to mention the character assassination and just general disrespect for Luke's character. Luke Skywalker was the epitome of hope, inspiration, and strength for a whole generation of people. Maybe even 2 or 3 generations before this movie came out. And so to see such an inspiring hero brought to such lows, with no real reason, no real purpose, no real ending or goal, just sort of a nihilistic destruction and breakdown of a famous character for the sake of deconstructing a famous character, it's pretty damaging. It's great to see Luke in The Mandalorian, and it's great to see Luke smiling in The Rise of Skywalker, but the damage to Luke is still there, and it's always there. People aren't just going to forget The Last Jedi, and I'm sure that a lot of people won't consider it headcanon for themselves. I know that I definitely don't. I'm in that crowd. But just even seeing that is really damaging to the image and the legacy of Luke Skywalker, which is a real shame. Especially considering that Mark Hamill himself is such a great person and so inspiring as an individual on his own, that he really poured a lot of himself into Luke Skywalker. And it's hard to see so many people that he worked so hard to inspire, all having to watch him kind of take away their inspiration and their hope. Even if it's just temporarily for one movie that most people don't even really consider canon anymore.
Who is this guy? How did the most optimistic, hopeful character in the galaxy turn into this hermit who says it's time for the Jedi to end? I read that and I said, what? I mean, that's not what a Jedi does. I mean, a Jedi is optimistic. A Jedi has tenacity. He never gives up. He doesn't secrete himself on an island, but you'll see.
So regardless of the recent repairs going on to make Star Wars better and all the other great things that have come in recent years, The Last Jedi is always a really dark spot in Star Wars history and on Luke Skywalker's legacy for everyone that loved the original movies. It's a tragedy that such a strong, important, inspiring cultural icon was lost or at least significantly damaged in that way that can never really be undone, even if it can be bandaged up. The fact that I'm still talking about it and people are still interested in listening to it years later just shows how deep of a wound that was, to have Luke Skywalker, the epitome of selflessness and positivity, just completely ground into nihilism. It was really devastating. There's not really any other word for it or much else to say about it, except to consider where Star Wars and the legacy of Luke Skywalker go from there. It has been some years since The Last Jedi came out, and there has been a lot of progress. Star Wars has gotten a lot better, and Luke Skywalker has had a lot more opportunities to shine in different media that's come out since then. Obviously, the fans will be fine. People will be fine. Their lives aren't based on Luke. Losing one inspirational hero and then getting him back a little bit later after one movie has damaged him is not that devastating. But it's still definitely worth talking about and worth realizing what happened so that hopefully it can be avoided in the future for other characters. Can you imagine if they did to Ahsoka the same thing that they did to Luke? I really hope that never happens, because that would be a tragedy, and I don't think it will, but that sort of thought just really shows you how important characters can be to people, and how important it is to preserve their essence, and to keep them alive in the way that they are intended. In recent years, there's been a lot of new reimaginings of various characters in various different ways to make them more dark and gritty, or more fun and silly, or all sorts of different things, you name it, and it exists. But at the fundamental level, the original characters that stuck with people are usually important for a reason. And so with that in mind, it's good to just appreciate the goodness of the most important characters in the stories that are most important to us. It's great to take inspiration from characters in fiction, because usually they can tell us more about ourselves than we can learn by even just living our normal daily lives. The worlds of fiction mirror the world of reality, and they teach us things that we need to learn. It's a lot nicer to learn life lessons by watching Luke Skywalker show it to us as a demonstration than it is to have to learn it for ourselves through painful personal experience, or to just be told by someone. In writing, there's always that famous phrase, show, don't tell, and movies are the ultimate way to show. And by showing us that if we are brave, if we do take care of ourselves, if we do take care of others, if we do try to make the world a better place in the small daily ways that we are personally able to do, movies shape our world and our lives, which is why individual characters are so important, and why what happened to Luke Skywalker was such a shame. But with everything said, the original Luke is still there. A New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and The Return of the Jedi are all still movies with the same characters, the same themes, and the same ideas as before. And they'll always be there. And as long as fans exist, and as long as hopefully the studios continue trying to listen to the fans at least a little bit, there will always be new content that's good, that inspires people and motivates people, and shows people that they can be better, and inspires people to be the best that they can be. So climb those sand dunes, stare out at those twin suns, dream big dreams, and remember that the Force will be with you, always.
It's the stuff that fairy tales are made of. We have a fairy princess. We have an innocent farm boy who yearns for adventure. Alec Guinness is a wise old wizard who teaches me a mystical force, somewhat like Merlin would teach a young King Arthur.